Hello everyone, welcome to IICIE Insights. I am privileged to be joined today by Donna Teuber, who specializes in using human-centered design to assist organizations in developing successful programs through team building, strategic planning, service design, and innovation labs. Donna is also on the teaching team for IDEO University. She was a contributor writer for the ISTE publication, Get Active Reimagining Learning Spaces for Student Success. Her work is also featured in the ASCD publication, Design Thinking for School Leaders. Donna, welcome to IICI Insights.
Thank you so much, AJ. It's exciting to be here today and talk with you.
Thank you for making time just before Christmas. And I know we are having this recording done at 8 a.m. EST. So I have my coffee with me, and I'm sure you have your coffee with you also.
Yes, thank you.
That's great. After all, this is a coffee chat. So could you introduce yourself a little bit more for our listeners?
Yes, I've been in education mainly for much of my career, starting just working with K-12 education. I've worked at all different levels as a director of instructional technology as well as an innovation program designer. And I'm also a background in library and media science. So got sort of a wide range of experiences working at different levels of education. And I've also worked at higher ed as an adjunct instructor, teaching a variety of topics over the years for several different colleges and universities. And because of all that background, currently I had recently moved. And so I am working as a consultant, working with organizations that are seeking to bring about some sort of change and innovation, and just working as a facilitator and coach to help them achieve those results that they're looking for. And I also do some teaching with IDOU, which is around human-centered design and change management. So, had a wide variety of experiences. And also, you mentioned startups, and I've worked with a few startups, bringing design thinking to them, helping them to really design the services that they're going to roll out for customers.
That's a wealth of experience and expertise. I'm glad we are able to get you on this show. And our listeners, who are, of course, the innovators and entrepreneurs, they can benefit from your expertise. You mentioned to me earlier that you work with teams to define challenges, get unstuck from ineffective systems, and develop innovative practices. Can you give me more details on that?
Sure. And I think this probably resonates with most people in the entrepreneurship world, and startups and any organization that is maybe established and then trying to move forward to bring about some new products or services. And I always think that there's a little bit of a tension there if your organization is set up with a lot of departments, and it can become very siloed. So, in terms of getting teams to begin to think differently about how to work or to change a system that may be years old, something that has been established over many years of strategic planning and having people take on specific job roles, it can be very challenging to begin to see the system in a new way or to think about how you can shift the way that the organization works. And so what I do and what I just absolutely love to do is to facilitate a process using human-centered design and other methods to help organizations, bring a team together, a cross-functional team, and to get them into the room thinking about strategy in a different way, I think, as opposed to the strategic plan that's maybe been on paper for years, but thinking about the vision that they have for the organization, looking at the mission that they have, and then thinking about what are the key services that they might want to work on to change, or products to roll out in a different way. And so that's where having that cross-functional team is really important. And then also, I think from there, helping people to see what they want to deliver to people. So it's all about people. It's about what are the needs of people. So we do use the design thinking model out of the Stanford D School, thinking about empathizing with our customers, our users, our stakeholders, what are their needs? What is it that they're dissatisfied with? And how can we really listen and observe to learn from those people who we are serving? And from there, it comes to the defining stage where you begin to, kind of unravel what's happened and get to the root cause of the issue that they're trying to solve for. So, what is the challenge? What are the needs? And then, how can we reframe that as an opportunity to move forward in the organization? And then I'll just continue with the design thinking process because, then I always say the magic happens. It's I think, very difficult to get to the root cause of a problem. So having people spend a lot of time thinking about, what is the root cause? Why are we having this issue? What should we tackle first in order to set up that chain where other things will be able to also happen? It's like a set of dominoes. What's the first change that you can make that will facilitate other processes working? And then from there, we use ideation. After we have some insights about what the core challenges are, we can have an ideation session, the brainstorming, where people can begin to share out all their ideas. And we always say, go for quantity, and there are no bad ideas. Just having that opportunity for every single person in the room to have input and to think out of the box a little bit and to really push the thinking around the users that you're trying to design for. And then we go into, of course, the prototyping. What are the ideas that might have the most impact that are maybe low effort to implement first, but picking some things that you can try to see if you can get feedback, because it's an iterative cycle. It's all about getting feedback from other people who the service or the product is designed for. And it's also about not spending too much time and effort up front so that you're paralyzed and you never move forward. So the prototyping process then leads to testing out with a larger audience, trying version 1 with one type of customer perhaps, and then moving from there. But to change a system, you have to have, I always say, you've got to have dissatisfied people who are ready for change. And you have to have those co-conspirators, the people who are really ready to bring about that change. So there's a little bit of and a vision, and then taking those first steps. So that's what I love to do with organizations, is just to go in and we just roll up our sleeves and begin at the beginning with thinking about the needs of others.
Very, very interesting. Maybe our listeners might want to understand the differentiation between design thinking and innovation. Those two, I know they're complementary, but how can we differentiate between the two?
Yeah, that is a great question. Design thinking can definitely lead to innovation by helping people to think around, what their current challenges are, and to come up with more innovative ideas, innovative solutions, things that you can try out. And the process for human-centered design, I think, is that beginning piece. Innovation has many more pieces to it. Of course, there's measuring things in a different way. How do you measure success? How does a team work to implement a new service? So what's under the hood, so to speak. I always like to think about, with service design at least, there being the stage where all the people are playing out what's happening, but behind the scenes there are many processes and systems at work, and a lot of detail. So design thinking can give you the opportunity to really get into listen to the needs of others. I think that is the primary part. And of course, all innovations don't come from design thinking, and design thinking doesn't always lead to innovation. It can lead to just incremental improvements, and it can be used on a personal basis, on a organizational basis. And I think that's what I love about the method or the process, is that it's just taking us to this level where we can be more creative and start thinking about possibilities. But when you do begin to come up with a great idea, you do see the possibility that it will be an innovation that could be a game changer. That's where you bring in other processes in terms of the testing and getting it out into the organization, and then just having planning. That's where you do a lot of planning, the business model canvas, thinking about all the ways that you are going to be successful, looking at the funding structure. We always say that for something to really take off, it has to be desirable, feasible, and viable. So when you think about desirability, that comes from knowing your users and understanding their needs and having something that people want. But feasibility is the technology there to support it, right? Is this something that's brand new that we don't that doesn't exist? Then there will certainly be a lot of processes to make it something that's feasible. And then the last thing is the viability, financially. Of course, this is when you begin to look at how the system works and are there finances there to support this change or this innovation. But I would say design thinking and human-centered design starts you on the journey for innovation. And it helps with that change management. But then you definitely have a lot of other processes in place to bring an innovation to scale to make sure that it's something that is going to be sustainable over time.
I do want to talk to you about scaling innovation. As you know, I am in the cybersecurity field and also in the automotive, connected and autonomous vehicles. And there is a lot of innovation happening, electric vehicles, smart cities, and all of that area. The question which comes is, when you're talking at that level, which is like industry wide or even society wide, how do you scale innovation? How can you actually go through that process where, let's say, not only in an organization but in an industry, you are able to enable innovation?
Yes, and that is certainly a large change and a big organizational change that goes beyond even your own business, right? It goes into how other people in other industries actually work also. And I think for changes like that, where what you're creating is something that will be impacting other organizations. I mean, I don't know much about the field, but I do know that it would probably impact car manufacturers. We use something called journey mapping, and we also use personas and different ways to think about all the stakeholders who will be impacted. And so once you have gone through a process where you can begin to really zone in on like what are as I mentioned, the first things that need to change, perhaps the first stakeholders that we need to design for, then that is where you can start tackling some of what I call the conflict or the tension in the system. Because to change a system, something system-wide that will also have an impact beyond your own organization, requires you to just start with implementing those smaller innovations that will help you to scale. I always think about like a rocket ship going to the moon or out to outer space. I've been watching the right stuff. So thinking about just those incremental improvements, like, okay, let's get somebody up in the air and back down, and then let's orbit more. But just beginning to get those ideas out into the world and testing them early. I think that's what's really important, to test early and often, and to get so much feedback that you're able to get other people to be on board. Because that's the thing. We could all want a beautiful change, like an autonomous car, self-driving vehicles. I think of all the things that I would really love, but then you begin to think about who will be impacted and how do we get those people on board. And so, systems design is so important at that point. And that's where you bring in, I would say, other processes to begin to think about, if we do this, what is the impact system-wide? So you can begin to see what could happen. We also do something in the design thinking world we call the pre-mortem. Let's see if we can kill this idea before it takes off. Just thinking about, okay, what happens? What will the results be? And let's play out some scenarios to think about, where we're going to need to pay attention, because something innovative is going to change a lot of different people's lives and organizations. And people tend to be very, very fearful. I think that's the other thing about any change that will impact what they know how to do. I mean, it can be very scary to realize that the job that you had is perhaps going to change completely for you to stay in the organization. So those are just all the, I think, to tackle the fears and not to just have one group of people just moving forward and pushing forward, getting the leadership level to be supportive of the people who are doing the work. I think, there's a nice balance. There has to be a balance between the innovation team, the grassroots team, out there trying new things, as well as having that top level management support and sponsorship, so that you can have permission, to do some double delivering, perhaps, going out and continuing to do things the current way that you're doing them, but also trying some new methods.
You mentioned fear as one factor, which is probably a hurdle in scaling innovation. Leadership support is another factor you mentioned. So ultimately, I guess it's a culture, it's a mindset in the organization which must prevail. What can be the other hurdles which an organization face in enabling innovation?
Definitely, as you mentioned, it's that mindset. And I also speak a lot about open innovation. For an organization to be really successful, you have to bring everyone in that organization into this mindset. And so giving them opportunities through incubator type programs. I've worked with a number of different types of teams where you're allowing people at all levels of the organization to begin to try things maybe within their own department, giving them some permission to experiment, iterate, sometimes fail. But it's definitely something that you need to move beyond just that closed system. I mean, a lot of innovations are very strategic. They're focused on something that a core group of people have decided to move forward with. And one of the biggest mistakes is to not give other people in the organization the ability to do that also. So it is definitely a culture shift for the organization, having people come to the table who work at all levels of that project and giving them a say in how to move forward. And I think that's definitely one of the biggest hurdles. And of course, the other hurdle is if you're an established business or service, and as I'm from education, so I can use that as an example. Right now with remote learning, you can imagine there have been some innovative things happening, but we have parents to think about. We have, just the state level testing, and how are students going to learn what they need to know, and how are we going to be able to monitor how students are learning right now. And there's school leadership and district leadership that are trying to change everything they've ever done, right? They're changing all their services. They're changing the bus routes, and they're changing how students get food. How do we serve those kids? How do we serve students who have special needs and are not able to perhaps access all of the services that they had in the past? And so it's just an unimaginable change, and you could look at it as being very innovative to be shifting the way education is working right now. But you can also see that there are a lot of strains on the system because, there was no way during the pandemic, of course, to get everybody on the same page through, gently rolling out different parts of this plan. So people were doing a lot of sort of triage, emergency planning. And then, ultimately when kids are back in school in their desks, face to face, and teachers are there and we're past this current stage, the question will be, will we go back to where we were before? Because we never really established that system where everyone is seeing the benefits. So, right now, I think it's really important with this particular example to think about parents, like what things have we learned about how we serve students and the role that parents or guardians play in the education of their students. There will be some big shifts over time, but it's easy just to go back to the way things were because everybody had experience and practice in doing that. So it's those it's those people, all the people who are affected that have to be brought into the solution. So this is a good time, even though something has pushed ahead perhaps a little too fast, it's a good time to bring people back together and say, what worked, what is something we want to build on, and what are some things that we just need to forget about right now. But if it's got to be inclusive.
That's a very good example. And of course, as we live through the pandemic, it is very timely. It is something which we need to look at. And you are the correct person to actually explore those opportunities for new learning methodologies. The one reason I reached out to you was I saw your video where you are actually training teachers to use innovation in their classrooms. So you not only you teach innovation directly to the end user, you teach others to teach innovation, which is very interesting, and redesigning the whole classroom experience across the society. Definitely, we need army of innovation SMEs who can go out there and help our kids go through the new learning challenges which they are having in this. I think based on what you just said, we're basically redesigning the entire school services.
Yes, sort of in that emergency way, because everyone had to. And I, with my background also with the technology, knowing that a lot of school systems were already thinking about the future, right? They were already thinking about students being digital and having the technology in place so that students could be digital. There were so many things that kind of fell through the cracks, like there are a lot of forward-thinking districts thinking about project-based learning and entrepreneurship programs for students, which I think is so important to teach our students to be problem solvers and to not lose that creativity that sometimes they lose by the time they graduate from high school because they're trying to pass the SAT and get into college, and they're trying to find the answer that people want as opposed to being creative and thinking about new solutions. We want our students to be in a world like that, but you can't just push that forward in just a small amount of time. So as schools go back face to face, I think it's keeping the best of this, which was students having student agency, they having more control over their own schedules to some extent. And then we see that the flip side of that is, of course, that our students may need more help with self-management and time management and making sure that they're able to get that work done. So we see like all this opportunity, and then at the same time, we'll see those challenges that students will be facing. But the other thing that I've noticed through this whole process has been just globally bringing educators together on a global level. And I think this could work probably with any organization that has been doing remote work right now. You begin to see that the world is a lot smaller than you originally thought, that you do have a lot in common with others, that you can connect. What we've done in education is just open up this huge window of opportunity for students and educators to connect with others around the globe. The walls of the school have not mattered so much anymore. It's been, people have been able to think creatively. Maybe we need to have class in the evenings so that parents can be there to support their child working. So we've just, we've opened up the window, I would say, and we haven't quite stepped through the door yet because we need to go back and think about how to do this in a more strategic way and what planning needs to go into place so that this can be scalable. And when we get back to our schools, that we can certainly begin to implement some of the things we've already been doing in sort of that emergency mode, but do them with more intent and better understanding of how you need to bring everybody on board to support those changes.
Sounds like we need global think tank to enable the education of the future. Probably you're already getting together like-minded people enabling these activities. Do you see there's a huge desire for this change across the world, come together and work together to solve this problem?
I've participated in a global group, several global groups recently, and I do think there's we've broken, as I said, broken down those barriers a little bit because everybody's in the same virtual boat, I think, with remote learning, and so people are more willing to ask questions like, how do you do something in your country, or what is your school system doing to manage, how to feed feed children. So I think there's a lot of collaboration right now. And, I guess we get pushed into collaboration sometimes when we have a problem to solve, and then we want to seek out those people who can help us find the answers. So it's just, I think that is one thing I'll take from this whole time period of being remote and working with teachers and other educators at the remote level, is just the willingness of people to share and talk with each other, and to having pushed through that initial barrier of the fear, really being in a place now to think about reimagining, like, what can we do next to make education just what it needs to be for our kids. And even with all the pre-planning we did when we thought we were being innovative, we didn't expect this, right? No one played out the scenario of pandemic. What do we do? I don't know that was something that was on people's radar for really big thinking in terms of some of the programs that were being implemented, like entrepreneurship or project-based learning. So now that we have this experience of something so completely different that we had not imagined, I think that has opened up people, I believe, to being more creative in their thinking about solutions and how to push forward with those.
Another area where there's innovation and new thinking and ideation is an incubator. And you, of course, have experience setting up an incubator. You were part of the R2 Innovates team. I'm sure you have some great insights on how incubators can help in the current scenario.
Yes, definitely. That's, I think, another one of my biggest passions is being able to work with organizations that have an innovation program or an incubator program. It's so important to let, as I mentioned, the people at the grassroots level, perhaps, who know that there's something that needs to be changed. I mean, it's their job and their work, so they know what needs to be changed, but to give them the opportunity, which includes time and resources. And I always say cutting the red tape. They always need someone who is at a sponsor level, someone in the organization in a leadership role who can help with that, cutting the red tape, and then just facilitating, paving, opening those roads up so that the team can move forward. And that includes, for me, working with teams at the very beginning through, as that problem solving. What is it we need? What is our challenge? Who are the people? What are people saying about this? And how can we meet those needs in a different way? So, we lead teams through the design thinking process, but we go well beyond that. As I mentioned, with innovation, it's a long process. So it could be, just getting some prototypes out there in the first year, and in the second year, having a product, a service that you're going to share out with a limited group of people. And then from there, scaling is really, how does this become maybe not an like innovation for our organization so much, but as a way of doing things or a new product or service that we've absorbed into our organization, which includes the budget and the feasibility. So I do enjoy working with teams coming at that very beginning, because there's always an aha. There's this time when people have learned and they come together and they realize that they've got sort of this really good challenge statement. They've got a how might we question that is going to help them to think about lots of different solutions that's going to get them to a new place. So I like that. And then the other thing that I'm really passionate about is just innovation management. I think most organizations probably have a small team. I know a lot of businesses have a small team of dedicated to innovation within the organization. And having teams like that are able to pull in other people throughout the organization to work on special projects is really essential. Being able to say it's okay that we've got maybe even in education this teacher, but we're going to give this teacher a substitute so that they can go and spend a few days with their team working on bringing this idea to life, and then coming up with a plan for how they can do that outside of their day job, but also just giving them time during the work day to to work on some of these projects. And then, with innovation management, I'm also really passionate about using some technology like an innovation management platform to manage that pipeline so that you have transparency throughout the organization of what's happening. Because I think that's the other really downside of trying to do some new things is that if there's not enough transparency, there's like whispering, what are they doing? Or they're about to get rid of our jobs, or this is what I heard, so people are a little bit more afraid if they don't know what's happening. So if you can create a platform and a way for everyone in the organization to see, oh, this is something that we're trying. These are the people who are involved. This is what's happened. This is what will happen next, and giving everyone an opportunity to, see the data that's been collected, see the work as, under the hood. What is it that has gone on? Then you have a better chance of bringing that innovation forward in your organization.
And basically, I guess it is all about enabling new ideas and giving them a place to grow, somewhere where one can try it, whether we are talking about an incubator, whether we are talking about innovation in an organization. So it's all about enabling new ideas and how they can grow.
Yes, and giving people that safe space to make that happen. And my story, I think I might have shared where we began in my former school district, Richland 2, with an incubator. We just started very small with just we had a little trailer that was just a mess, and we were able to provide a space and give people, like we called it, the key to the portable, so they could go in at any time they wanted. They, of course, with the permission of supervisors, if it was during the school day, of course, but giving people the permission and a safe place where they can go and feel like it's theirs. It's their project, knowing they have a lot of accountability, but also just knowing that they have some resources to get started and some support. And it's really always about having somebody who's going to be there as a coach. I think that's the other part maybe I didn't mention, just coaching people through this process. It's not just come in for a 2-day workshop and you're going to be set for putting your idea out into the world, but it's really coaching people through the process and helping them to use a lot of different strategies to explore what they should do. And facilitating the process. Anyone who's been in a team meeting knows that you can just go off on a tangent really fast, and people will never get to what they want to happen. So having a facilitator who can facilitate that process and who doesn't have a viewpoint one way or the other, but who just wants to support this team is really important too. And one thing I've also always done is thinking about people and is there a mentor? Is there someone that we can connect this person with or this team with who's been through this? And thinking outside of your own industry is really important. Is there a mentor in the business world who's been really successful with something that you could bring in to support say a team of teachers in moving their idea forward? So getting that different perspective. I think that was the other thing, just to mention, that getting that other perspective, those many different perspectives in our own worlds and in our own organizations, we have those biases and, that sort of tunnel vision sometimes about the way things should be done. So being just being able to open up and see, oh, it's done completely differently over in this other organization. And these are some things that they're doing to address similar issues, because I think any organization trying to innovate, there are a lot of parallels, even though it might be a different industry.
Those are some amazing tips for our listeners. Could you also mention a few resources on innovation and design thinking?
I have so many. Yes, I probably should share a book list you can link, but I do go to the Stanford D School quite a bit. They have a design thinking toolkit. They also have they're in IDOU, of course, is where I do some teaching, but IDO has a lot of resources on their website, a lot of case studies also, and posts. So I do a lot of recommending that people, check out some of the blog posts that IDEO and the Stanford D School post. There's some free downloads of toolkits that are helpful for organizations that want to get started. And then there are so many books out on innovation right now, and I wish I meant to bring a stack of books I could share with you. But one book I really like is The Other Side of Innovation. Scaling Innovation. I think that is an excellent resource to just think about everything that needs to go into play to be innovative. And of course, David Kelly, Creative Confidence is a classic in my world. But yes, I would love to just share additional resources. I have a number of things that I use, and some things are just written by innovators, and others are design, human-centered design. Here are some toolkits. The Luma Institute has a number of different resources to help teams through the process. Lots of things to share.
Yeah, I am already thinking about what do I have to get on Amazon. All these books, definitely I have to collect them and go through them. Donna, as we come to the end, what is the final piece of advice you ought to give to the innovators out there?
Great question. I think persistence is the most important thing. If you are an innovator and you see that there's something that can really bring some good change in the world, my advice is to persist, but not to be tunnel vision, but to bring in other people. One of my first and favorite TED Talks is, I can't remember the full title, but it's First Followers. And it's just this idea of, how can you get the first person out there dancing so that everyone else is also feeling comfortable to do that, and that you sort of fade into the background. So I'm also a big fan of Theory U, which is something I forgot to mention, but just this idea of being in, presencing and, going beyond your own ego. Innovation does not happen always through ego. I can't say it does. I would say it probably does happen occasionally, but I think ultimately an innovation is something where you're able to enable others and bring them into the process, so that it's not about you and your idea anymore, but you're listening to other people. So it's definitely, I'd say, listen, find some co-conspirators, some people that you can bring in who can be those people who become the leaders with this, and who can help bring others on board. And then just it's got to be persistence, and not taking it personally, taking feedback from others, asking for feedback and being a grateful receiver of feedback is so important, because it's so easy to be frustrated when things aren't going your way. And I think a true innovator has always been in the hot seat. I'm not sure, you're going to be in somebody's office at some point and in that hot seat where something has happened, and you're going to be, sort of blamed for it, because it's really easy to blame the new thing if something happens. And so just building support around you, talking to the people as I mentioned, transparency at all levels to make sure that everyone knows what's happening, and to, be willing to persist, share what you're doing, and, take some risks, but also be inclusive and make sure that you're paying attention to all the things around you that could either enable you to be successful or, cause you to have some setbacks.
Donna, I want to thank you. This has been an absolute privilege. I've learned so much during this conversation, and I think people need to apply ideation, innovation thinking, design thinking in our lives to better the human society. So thank you for your work, and thank you for your insights today.
Well, thank you so much, AJ. It's been a pleasure, and I'll be happy to share some resources later.